On January the 28th, 1986, the Space Shuttle Challenger disintegrated just 73 seconds into its flight from Cape Canaveral, Florida. On board were 7 astronauts, one of whom was a civilian. In fact, a high school history and social sciences teacher, Krista McAuliffe, who was the first US teacher, or the first teacher ever in space aboard space vehicle. She had already designed a few lessons that she would have given from space. Anyway, at issue was the fact that the winter of 1986, like the previous winter, had been unseasonably cold in much of North America and Europe, and the O-ring seal or seals were not designed to fly under unusually cold conditions, and unfortunately the temperature was around freezing, if not even slightly below, at the time of the launch. Anyway, the failure of the O-ring seal caused a breach in the SRB, or solid rocket booster joint it sealed, allowing pressurized burning gas from within the solid rocket motor to reach the outside and impinge upon the adjacent SRB aft field joint attachment hardware and external fuel tank. The disaster caused a 32-month or 2-year and 8-month break in the shuttle program and the formation of the Rogers Commission, a special commission which the then US President Ronald Reagan appointed to investigate the accident. He had launched a program in 1984 or 1985 to begin a search among the elementary and high school teachers of the United States for the first teacher in space to join the crew of that space shuttle. According to one study, 85% of Americans, that is about 5 in 6 Americans who were surveyed, had heard the news within an hour of the accident. And indeed, at many schools across the United States, the launch was watched live. And actually in many other workplaces as well. So an estimated 17% of Americans, or 1 in 6 Americans, witnessed the launch live and therefore saw the tragic accident live as well. There had been delays because of the unseasonably cold weather. Originally, it was set to launch from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida already on January the 22nd. However, then it was moved to January the 24th, 25th, 23rd, 24th, 25th, 26th, 27th, and eventually to 28th. Forecasts for January the 28th, 1986, even for Cape Canaveral, Florida, predicted an unusually cold morning with temperatures close to -1 degrees Celsius or 30 degrees Fahrenheit, which was the minimum temperature permitted for launch. The Space Shuttle Challenger was never thought to be or guaranteed to be safe to operate in such low temperatures. And the O-rings, like many other critical components, had no proven data to support that they would work under such low temperatures. At the teleconference on the evening of January the 27th, the Thiokol engineers and managers discussed the weather conditions with NASA managers from Kennedy Space Center and Marshall Space Flight Center. Several engineers, most notably Roger Boisjoli, re-expressed their concerns that the low temperatures would probably cause the rubber O-rings sealing the joints of the solid rocket boosters to break, and recommended that the launch be postponed until seasonable temperatures, or more or less seasonable temperatures, returned. And then there was ice. The low overnight temperatures, on the evening before the launch, the temperature had sunk to -8 degrees Celsius or 18 degrees Fahrenheit, would almost certainly result in solid rocket booster temperatures below their red line of 4 degrees Celsius or 39 degrees Fahrenheit. The Kennedy Ice Team accidentally pointed an infrared camera at the aft field joint of the right solid rocket booster and found the temperature to be a frigid -13 degrees Celsius or 9 degrees Fahrenheit. The temperature on the day of the launch was much lower than with previous launches, below freezing at between -2.2 and -1.7 degrees Celsius, or between 28.0 and 28.9 degrees Fahrenheit. The previous coldness record in terms of temperatures at launch of space shuttles had been 12 degrees Celsius or 54 degrees Fahrenheit. And although the ice team had worked through the night to remove ice, engineers at Rockwell still expressed concern. Despite these concerns, the 7 astronauts boarded the shuttle. The space shuttle's main engines were ignited at 6.6 seconds before the launch. They are liquid fueled and can be safely shut down, and the launch can be aborted or interrupted if necessary until the solid rocket boosters are ignited exactly at the launch time. Later review of launch film showed that already 0.678 seconds after the launch, strong puffs of dark gray smoke were emitted from the right-hand solid rocket booster near the aft strut that attaches the booster to the ET, or external tank. It had to also travel through, the shuttle had to travel through a series of wind shear events that were stronger than on any previous flight. And at 58.788 seconds before or after the launch had started, a tracking film camera captured the beginnings of a plume near the aft attached strut on the right solid rocket booster. Unknown to the 7 astronauts on board the Challenger or in Houston, Texas, hot gas had started to leak through a growing hole in one of the right-hand solid rocket booster joints. At 64.660 seconds, the plume suddenly changed shape, indicating that a leak had begun in the liquid hydrogen tank. At this stage, the situation still seemed normal both to the crew and to flight controllers. At 68 seconds, the Capcom Richard O. Colby informed the crew that they were to go at throttle up, that is, to go at full speed, and Commander Dix Colby confirmed, "Roger, go at throttle up." And this was the last communication from Challenger on the air-to-ground loop. At 72.284 seconds, the right solid rocket booster pulled away from the aft strut, attaching it to the external tank. Half a second after this acceleration, or sudden lateral acceleration that had begun approximately 72.5 seconds into the launch, pilot Michael J. Smith said, "Uh-oh." He might have been responding to onboard indications of main engine performance or to falling pressures in the external fuel tank. And at 73.124 seconds, the aft dome of the liquid hydrogen tank failed. The vehicle started to break up at 73.162 seconds and at an altitude of 48,000 feet or 15 kilometers. The Challenger then veered from its correct attitude with respect to the local airflow, resulting in a load factor of up to 20 or 20G, well over its design limit of 5G, and was quickly ripped apart by abnormal aerodynamic forces. The cabin crew, or crew cabin, which had been more solidly built, did survive the breakup, and probably all of the 7 astronauts were still alive. In mission control, there was a burst of static on the air-to-ground loop as the Challenger disintegrated. And then one of the officers said there that the flight controllers were looking very carefully at the situation and noted that there must have been a major malfunction. And then there was no downlink, and moments later, one of the officers, the same officer, Public Affairs Officer Steve Nesbitt, informed the US public, and of course those people who were watching the launch live outside the United States, that the vehicle had exploded. NASA estimated that the load factor at separation was between 12 and 20 G, and within 2 seconds it had already dropped to below 4 G, and within 10 seconds the crew cabin was in free fall, uncontrollable descent. The forces involved at this stage were likely insufficient to cause major injury. Probably at least some crew members were alive and briefly conscious after the breakup, because 3 of the 4 recovered personal egress air packs on the flight deck had been activated. Investigators found their remaining unused air supply consistent with the expected consumption during the 2-minute 45-second post-breakup trajectory. There was unfortunately no way for any of the pilots to escape from the crew cabin. If the cabin was not depressurized or slowly depressurizing, the crew members may have been conscious for the entire fall until impact. If, however, the detached crew cabin did not maintain pressure integrity, they only were conscious for a few seconds. Anyway, the crew cabin hit the surface of the Atlantic Ocean at roughly 207 miles or 333 kilometers per hour, with an estimated deceleration at impact of well over 200 G, far beyond the structural limits of the crew compartment or crew survivability levels. That evening, US President Ronald Reagan gave one of his most somber and probably also most memorable televised speeches, postponing the annual State of the Union address for a week, ending it with the following statement, which quoted from the poem High Flight by John Gillespie Magee Jr. "We will never forget them, nor the last time we saw them this morning, as they prepared for their journey and waved goodbye and slipped the surly bonds of earth to touch the face of God."